Hi there, this is Matt at State of Flux, here with a review for Batman Begins. And this is a movie that's quite interesting. This is one of the movies responsible for reigniting the prestige of Batman, one of the films that put filmmaker Christopher Nolan on the map as an incredibly marketable filmmaker. But it's also a film that I have conflict with. I'm going to start by talking about the positives of the film. I think the first 45 minutes to an hour, but really those first 45 minutes are possibly the best interpretation we've ever gotten at Bruce Wayne as a character. It dives deep, and it is so interesting, complex, and done with the rich Nolan style of telling a story out of order with complexity and nuance, while also kind of lacking subtlety, which works to the benefit of a comic book film. And I absolutely loved the first 45 minutes. I think that is, as I say, the best use of Bruce Wayne as a character that we've seen across the board. Full stop. There's a moment in that, though, towards the end of that final 45 minutes, at around the 38-minute mark, where the film seems to have a confused ethos or morality, where just the idea of I don't have to save you comes into play, which somewhat makes sense, especially with a character such as Batman. But when he is refusing to let that prisoner die at the 38-minute mark because he won't become like them, he's not going to kill them, and then he sets up a scenario wherein the entire building blows up, several people die, and he commits massive amounts of manslaughter, including probably the death of that character, because the only person he chooses to save is the Descartes character. That I have conflict with. He won't kill one person, but he'll enable a situation to unfold that could kill many, and that just seemed very confused. That was the first moment in the movie where I was like, ooh, I don't like this. Then, after that 45-minute mark, as I say, we have a lot of character growth. We get to know Bruce Wayne. We get to know his ins and outs, why he makes decisions, and what his motivation is, what he plans to do, and how he's going to do it. But he has arrested development in character growth at the moment that he decides to stand up at about an hour and 6 minutes into the movie inside the Batcave and face his fear. The moment he has confronted his fear, we already know what his motivation is going to be in the future, his desire to become a symbol in the form of a bat. Everything else, the remaining hour and 20 minutes of that movie has no more character development for Bruce Wayne or Batman. He doesn't grow beyond that point. He doesn't change beyond that point. And that is the problem with the movie. It is so good for about an hour, and then the next 90 minutes happen. And the next 90 minutes have very, confused morality, and some stuff that is just straight up kind of dumb. The microwave emitter being one of them. The microwave emitter is MacGuffin in this story to allow Scarecrow's toxin to get into the people of Gotham by flooding the sewer systems with it, the water systems, with this toxin, but it's imperceptible because it has to be released as a gas. This microwave emitter turns water into gas in an instant. So that is the master plan of Ra's al Ghul and his League of Shadows to tear Gotham apart, having the people physically tear Gotham apart brick by brick, just like Bruce Wayne had wanted to do to the mansion, before that changed at the end, where he'll rebuild it brick by brick. That said, has nobody taken a steamy shower? Hasn't, like, surely those people in the Narrows, the ones that can afford housing, they're living off ramen. Did not one of them make ramen in the time? They said this has been happening for weeks. Are we led to believe that not a single person in Gotham used hot running water or allowed water to naturally become a gas on its own, let the water stagnate and just come back up into the atmosphere? That doesn't flow. And the reason I'm asking these questions and taking this story far too seriously is because the movie kind of demands me to do so. So that final 90 minutes of the movie, while not bad, is just so mixed in its interpretation. And had it worked really well as an action film, I would be able to overlook that. But at this point in his career, Christopher Nolan did not know how to shoot action. Now, you could argue that the confused nature with which the film is shot in its action scenes is meant to disorient and puts you in the perspective of the people Batman is fighting. But even when Batman is clearly the perspective to be shown during an action scene, it's still shot and confused with quick cuts. And that was very popular from Bourne Identity and Bourne Supremacy on, so I get why that was a want to do for this film. But it's lucky that this is something Christopher Nolan grew out of with this film. I think he responded to the fact that that just didn't really work for Batman. You want to see an action movie, you want to see what Batman is capable of doing. And while this Batman has never been a particularly interesting visual fighter, Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises do paint a picture of a fighting Batman that is at least shot and edited much more interesting than this film is. So yeah, I will say, like, Christopher Nolan in general, I still think even to this day has never nailed action right. What he does get is spectacle. He understands how to make a spectacular image. And he does that in this film several times. The moment that Bruce Wayne climbs the mountain to find that grand building that the League of Shadows resides within is one of the most memorable shots I have of this movie. He knows how to give you grandeur and splendor on the visual canvas in front of you. And that is where he works best. And I think still to this day, that is where Christopher Nolan and why Christopher Nolan is so successful as a visual storyteller. It's not the action, it's the splendor that the action inhabits. And yeah, so this was still a bit of growing pains from Christopher Nolan. But it's also a testament to his ability to extract performance that makes this movie good in that last 90 minutes that I struggle so with. And it's because of exceptional performances across the board, but oh my god, Christian Bale, I couldn't remember his name for a second. Christian Bale is fantastic in this movie. He is so good as Bruce Wayne in this. And he hasn't adopted the silly voice quite yet. Like, it's there a little bit, but not too much. That really comes with the second film. He is quite good in this movie, and I get that. Ned Flanders is fantastic. I kid. But Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon is really good. And he's underused in this movie, but that would be course corrected in the sequel. You have Cillian Murphy, who was just spellbinding when I first saw this movie. He was my takeaway. I was like, he's the best part about the movie. Not only is he the most interesting character, he's played so incredibly well, and his delivery of the Batman is so good. I loved it. I loved it so much. He's one of my favorite actors, and this is one of the first movies that I got introduced to him. I'd seen like 28 Days Later prior to this, but 2005 I saw this one and Red Eye within close proximity to each other, and I was like, this dude is just on point. He's amazing. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson was really, really good in this film. And there was word after Phantom Menace that he was kind of done with acting, and he decided that he was going to retire with U-571, if you remember that movie at all. But he opted not to retire and did a couple more movies in between that film and this one, Love Actually notable among them, but he is really quite good. I hadn't really seen him in a truly villainous role, and it's a great misdirect because having seen him in Phantom Menace, which at the time I saw this movie I was most familiar with, in a mentor role, and in this he adopts a mentor role playing Deckard, I totally bought into it and I liked him. And I was bummed that he disappeared through the second half. That said, I'd been familiar with the comics, and I was like, wow, Ra's al Ghul got taken out of this way fast. Like, what? And then the big twist conclusion is that he was actually Ra's al Ghul. And Deckard plays both mentor, but also antagonist to Batman in this. And I really liked that twist. It's one of those things from the comic books that gets changed, and a lot of times comic book purists get hung up on things, but I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody that got hung up on this one, because it's effective and it works, and it paints a different picture of Ra's al Ghul that you haven't really experienced prior to this film. So I think it really works well. So yeah, props there. The story and screenplay was written by David Goyer. David Goyer is an interesting writer in that he has both written some of my favorite comic book movies and a lot of comic book movies, and movies in general that I really quite hate and despise. But he does a fair job with this one. A lot of people point to this sort of being an honest, serious take, and using Batman Year One by Frank Miller as its backbone, and I see that to some extent. Had this been framed a little more around Commissioner Gordon, I could see it a little more, but it's not. There's elements, certainly, of Batman Year One, but what I find it to be more similar to is Batman, the Man Who Laughs, which I know is a Joker story, but if you lift Joker out and replace him with Scarecrow, Scarecrow's plot in this film is lifted directly from that comic by Ed Brubaker, where Joker is putting his toxin into the water system with the plans of having it affect everybody in Gotham and make them turning into men who laugh themselves. Sound familiar? That's literally the same plot. That said, I think that it works. It has beats of humor that I think are genuinely funny as written, yet Christopher Nolan doesn't seem to understand humor, and so largely most of those jokes fall flat, even in gifted actors delivering these lines and stuff like that, who have seen be funny in other things before. It's all about timing, and Christopher Nolan isn't concerned with timing in that respect. For somebody who's so obsessed with the concept of time, he's not nailed comedic timing whatsoever, which is why humor's kind of dropped from pretty much every movie he's ever made after this one. Like, yeah, there's a couple little jokes in Inception and maybe The Dark Knight, but those are like offbeat kind of humor. There's nothing like strictly funny. Kind of here on out. And when it happens, it generally lands with a thud. But I digress. Batman Begins is definitely, to the point of its release, the best Batman movie that had come out. It goes lengths to explore Bruce Wayne, which largely had not been done in any live-action feature before. The closest we got to that was Batman Forever, and I think they did a decent job within that film, but that film also is a film that kind of juggles its responsibilities and doesn't wholly land on everything. This one does a much better characterization. I feel like I fully know what makes Bruce Wayne tick. and they gave it to me in a really good 45-minute pilot, and then the pilot just didn't stop. It just kept going for another hour and a half as we watched Batman fumble his way through being Batman. And yeah, I just wish that the trajectory of the story was spread out more so that Bruce Wayne's character arc had unfolded over the narrative of the story that they wanted to tell, rather than just the beginning of him rising up to be Batman. Once the Dark Knight rises, one might say, his character growth has stagnated for another 90 minutes. So at the end of the day, I give this a very strong 3 stars. I didn't respond to it particularly well when I first saw it. In fact, I had far more criticisms than I do now. But now that I've seen the Dark Knight trilogy as a whole and really understood what Christopher Nolan wanted to do with this story and rebranding Batman for a post 9/11 era, it works for me. I think my appreciation for this film has skyrocketed considerably with each passing film in the Batman narrative. And the sequels really help uplift this one. Yeah, I think that's kind of everything I wanted to cover. There was one more thing, but it slipped my mind, so maybe I'll address it in a future video, but I liked this movie. Oh, I was talking about, I figured it out. This will be my last point. When I first saw it and didn't like it, I'd never really seen a reboot before. This is considered one of the first, like, true reboots, right? And so when I saw this one and it was Batman Begins, I fully accepted the fact that we'd never really truly seen Batman's origin on screen before. We touch on it in Batman '89, and we touch on it again in Batman Forever, but we never truly saw how Bruce Wayne goes from being small boy to Batman. And this movie dives deep into that. The coda of this film, where Commissioner Gordon, or Lieutenant Gordon, is like, he left a card, and then Batman picks it up and it's the Joker, and he's like, I'll look into it. That whole little beat, I was like, oh, so that's how we go from this to Joker '89, or Batman '89, and I was like, well, these feels, there's no like connective tissue between these. I didn't understand at that point that this wasn't a prequel to the old Batman continuity that I'd been familiar with, but it was starting something new. I just didn't get that, and I kind of held that against the movie as well. And in fact, after I saw this one and was a little underwhelmed by it, I went home and the next day watched Batman '89, and I was like, there's no way these two movies connect. I just didn't respond well to it. But that was because this was kind of my introduction to what a reboot would end up being. I just took it as a James Bond, where each successive installment is another installment, and sometimes the actors are the same and sometimes they're different. I'd already gotten that a couple times with Batman and was meant to believe that they were within the same timeline at the time and stuff like that. So yeah, I really kind of struggled with that, and that was where I got the pushback. I also hated the Tumbler as the Batmobile. I wanted something a little more sexy and, than what we got, which is clump of tank with big wheels. Anyway, I'm droning. Batman Begins. The first 45 minutes is 4-star pitch perfection, and something that I like to rewatch quite often, honestly. It's very good. And then I just stop once he stands up in the cave, because everything else is fine enough, I guess. But anyway, let me know what you think of Batman Begins. This is, to a lot of people, this is their favorite Batman movie. Even more so than The Dark Knight. And that's interesting. If you're one of those people, let's talk about it in the comments down below. Gently massage that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Peace.